My best friend left me $40,000, then his son called me a conman. So I need some legal advice, but to explain the situation, I have to tell you about my friend first. And I want to tell you about him properly because he mattered to me, and because I think the fact that we were really genuinely friends is the whole point of everything that's happening now. For about 5 years, I lived right next door to him. He was a widower in his early 60s. He'd lost his wife before I ever moved in, so by the time I met him, he was living alone in the house next to mine. And I'll be honest, when I first moved in, I didn't expect us to become close. He had a good 30 years on me. On paper, we had no business being friends. He was a retired guy in his 60s, and I was a working man decades younger, different generations, different everything. But that's not how it went. We just clicked. It started small, the way these things do, a wave over the fence, then a conversation over the fence. Then he's inviting me over to watch a game and I'm bringing the beer. And before I really understood how it happened, this man had become one of my closest friends in the world. Let me paint you a picture of what our friendship actually looked like, because I think it matters. We watched football together, constantly. College ball, pro ball, didn't matter. If there was a game on, one of us was on the other's porch. We drank together. Nothing crazy, just two guys having a few beers and talking about nothing. This is the South, so I'll tell you, more than once the two of us sat out on my porch in our bathrobes on a Saturday morning, drinking a beer and watching college football, and around here, that's just considered acceptable behavior for grown men. Nobody better than I. But it wasn't all just games and beer, and that's the part I really want you to understand. Somewhere in those 5 years, the friendship got deeper than football. We talked, really talked. Late in the evenings, when the game was over and the beers were mostly gone, he'd get quiet and he'd tell me about his wife, about the life they'd built and the years they'd had before I ever showed up next door. You could hear in his voice how much he still missed her. He'd been carrying that loneliness around by himself for a long time before I moved in, and I think, without either of us ever saying it out loud, I became someone he could talk to again. Someone to fill a little of that quiet. And I'll be honest with you, it went both ways. I got just as much out of it as he did, maybe more. I wasn't in the easiest stretch of my own life back then, and this man, this steady, decent older guy, became something like the wise voice I didn't have anywhere else. He gave me advice. He talked me down when I was worked up about something stupid. He was, in a lot of ways, part friend and part the kind of father figure everybody could use. When you don't have a lot of people in your corner, a friendship like that isn't a small thing. It's everything. I'll give you one example because it's the one I keep thinking about. A couple years back, I hit a real low point. Now, some stuff in my life had gone sideways, the kind of stretch where you're not sure which way is up, and I hadn't said a word to him about it. But he noticed. Of course he noticed. He lived 10 feet away. And one evening he just knocks on my door, no game on, no reason, holding a six-pack, and he says, "Come sit on the porch, I don't feel like drinking alone." Which was a lie, because that man was perfectly happy drinking alone. He'd done it for years. He just knew I needed to not be by myself, and that was his way of getting me out there without making a thing of it. We sat out there half the night. He didn't lecture me. He just kept me company until I felt human again. That's the kind of friend he was. That's who this man was to me. Not a mark, not a payday, a guy who showed up with a six-pack because he could tell I was drowning. I even went to his church with him every now and then, and I'll be straight with you, church really isn't my thing, it's not my bag at all. But it was his, and it mattered to him, and going along sometimes was a way of being there for my friend. It made him happy to have me in the pew next to him, and honestly, seeing him happy was reason enough. So I went, and I did things for him too, the way you do for someone you care about. I mowed his lawn regularly, not because anyone asked me to, and not because I was angling for anything, but because he was getting older and I had a mower out anyway, and that's just what you do for a friend who lives next door. Half the neighborhood saw me out there doing it over the years, so that's who he was to me, not the old guy next door. A real friend, maybe one of the best I ever had. I need you to hold on to that as I get into the rest of this, because recently he passed away, and that on its own just gutted me. I lost my friend. I don't really have the words for what that was like, but I'll try. The house next door went dark and stayed dark. The porch is quiet now. There's no game on over there anymore, no light in the window on a Sunday afternoon, no one hollering at a bad call through the screen door. For 5 years, part of my week was just built around that man being right there, and then all of a sudden he wasn't, and the silence of it was louder than anything. I'd catch myself grabbing 2 beers out of the fridge out of pure habit before I remembered there was nobody to bring the second one to. I still do that sometimes. I mowed his lawn one last time after he was gone, because I didn't know what else to do with the ache, and because it felt wrong to let it grow. So understand, I was not okay. I was still right in the thick of grieving him, still raw, when the rest of this started. This isn't a story where I lost some acquaintance and then went hunting for a payday. I lost one of the most important people in my life, and I was barely keeping my head above water when everything else came crashing in. A little while after he passed, I found out that he had left me something in his will, and I had no idea it was coming. I want to be clear about that. He never once mentioned it to me. Ever. We didn't talk about his money because I didn't know he had any real money to talk about. He rented the house next to me. He drove nothing fancy. He lived simple. So when I found out what he'd left me, it genuinely knocked me off my chair. It was just over $40,000. $40,000. I sat there and read it twice. I had no idea in 5 years of friendship that this man had that kind of money to give. And here's the thing that makes it even stranger. I later learned that the $40,000 he left me was only about 5% of his total net worth. 5%, which meant 2 things hit me at once. 1, my simple living friend next door was actually quietly a fairly wealthy man. And 2, he had thought enough of me to leave me a piece of that, but a modest piece, 5%. He wasn't leaving me the bulk of anything. He left the vast majority of his estate to his family, exactly like you'd expect. He just carved out a small slice for his friend. And that, to me, felt like exactly who he was, a quiet, generous man remembering a friend. His family didn't see it that way, at least one of them didn't. He had 2 adult kids, a son and a daughter. I'd met the son maybe a couple of times over the years, just in passing. Never really knew him. And the son decided that the only possible explanation for his father leaving me anything at all was that I must have manipulated him, that I had somehow taken advantage of a vulnerable old man to weasel my way into his will. And he decided to fight it. He came after the gift and, by extension, after me, claiming I had taken advantage of his elderly father. And I want to tell you how that felt, because the money is honestly the least of it. I had just lost one of my best friends. I was grieving him. And in the middle of that grief, a man I barely know stood up and essentially called me a con artist. Said that the entire friendship, the football, the porch, the church, the mowing, all 5 years of it, was some long game I was running on a lonely old man to get his money. That the whole thing was a manipulation. It's hard to describe how much that stings when you're already hurting. He took the realest friendship I had and tried to turn it into a crime. I kept turning it over in my head, this idea that a stranger could look at 5 years of my life and see something so ugly in it. Every Saturday morning on that porch, every game we watched, every Sunday I sat in a church I don't even believe in just to be next to my friend. Every strip of grass I mowed in my memory. Those are some of the warmest, simplest, best times I've had. And this man wanted to reach back into all of it and relabel every single moment as a calculation, as me working an angle, as if I'd been keeping some ledger the whole time, waiting to cash out. And the cruelest part of it is that the one person who could have stood up and said, "No, that's not true, I saw the whole thing, they really were friends," was the man himself. And he's gone. He can't defend our friendship, so I have to do it for the both of us, to his own son, while I'm still grieving him. There is a special kind of awful in that. So here's where I stand, and here's why I think I'm actually in a strong position, even though the accusation cuts deep. First, my friend was completely mentally sharp right up to the end. He had health problems. Sure, he was a pack-a-day smoker for most of his life, and that catches up with a body. But none of his problems were mental. His mind was clear. Nobody who knew him could honestly claim otherwise. He knew exactly what he was doing when he made his decisions. Second, this is a small town, and in a small town people see things and people remember. I know plenty of folks who can personally attest to the fact that my friend and I actually had a real relationship. The regulars at the bar saw us. The people at his church saw me show up with him. Half the street watched me mow his lawn for years. Our whole friendship happened out in the open, in public, in front of witnesses, for half a decade. This wasn't some secret I orchestrated behind closed doors. It was the most public friendship you can imagine. And third, and this is the big one, my friend's daughter is a genuinely lovely woman, and she has no problem at all with her dad leaving me a small piece of his estate. She knew. She understood the friendship was real. Actually, the very first time I ever met her, she walked up to find her father and me sitting on my porch in our robes, watching college football and drinking a beer at some hour of the morning that probably wasn't appropriate. And she just laughed. She got it. She knew exactly what her dad and I were to each other. So that's my situation. My question is basically this. Does the son actually have a leg to stand on here? Is there any real weight to his claim? Or is he just a grieving, greedy man lashing out? And on top of that, what kind of lawyer do I even need to hire to deal with something like this? I'll be honest, I did misread part of the paperwork at first. When I read through the legal letter, it was full of terms I didn't understand, and I thought the son was suing me directly, like taking me to court personally. Turns out that's not quite it. What he's actually doing is contesting the will itself, which I'm learning is a different animal. Either way, I'm contacting a lawyer as soon as I possibly can. Update. So here's how the whole thing ended, and I've had some time to sit with it now, so let me lay it all out for you, including the actual numbers, because I know that's what everyone wants to understand. First, the human part. My friend's daughter, the lovely one, the one who caught us on the porch in our robes, she did not want to spend the next several months of her life and a small fortune in legal fees, fighting her own brother in court over her father's estate. And honestly, I don't blame her for 1 second. She just lost her dad too. She was grieving the same man I was. The last thing she wanted was a long, ugly, expensive war with her brother over his grave. So she wanted to settle, get it done, get it over with, and let everyone move on. And I got the strong feeling that settling was exactly what the son had been angling for the whole time. I don't think he ever really believed I was some master manipulator. I think he saw a piece of his father's money going to someone outside the family, and he figured if he made enough noise and threatened a long enough fight, everyone would eventually cave just to make him go away. And well, he wasn't wrong. Let me give you the actual numbers, because they tell the story better than I can. My friend's total estate came out to around $810,000. Most of it was cash, a retirement fund, that kind of thing, not property, because remember, he was renting the house next to me. He lived simple. He just saved. Now, the way he originally wrote his will, before I was ever in the picture, the split between his two kids was 65% to his daughter and 35% to his son. I don't know the family history there, but clearly he decided his daughter should get the larger share. That was his call long before me. When he decided to leave me my 5%, he didn't take it all from one kid. He carved it out of both of them proportionally. So the split in the will when he passed came out to 5% for me, 62.5% for his daughter, and 32.5% for his son. Then came the settlement. And here's where the son got what he really wanted. In the settlement, the two siblings agreed to split their portion evenly between them. So instead of the daughter getting more like her father intended, they each walked away with 47.5% even, and I kept my 5%. So do the math on what the son actually accomplished by contesting his father's will, by dragging his grieving sister to the negotiating table, by accusing his dad's friend of being a con man. He bumped himself up from 32.5% to 47.5%. On an $800,000 estate, that's a swing of over $100,000 into his pocket. He made himself somewhere north of $100,000 just for being difficult, just for being greedy enough to fight. That part stings. I won't pretend it doesn't. Watching a man get rewarded, and rewarded big, for behaving that badly, for basically strong-arming his own family, it doesn't sit right. It's the kind of thing that makes you a little cynical about how these things go. But here's the other side of it, and it's the side I've chosen to hold on to. My friend's daughter was more than happy with what she ended up with. Even after her brother's cut grew, her share was still more than enough to completely pay off her debts and to send her kids to a state college. She told me she was at peace with it. She got to bury her father without a courtroom brawl, and she came out the other side able to give her own kids a future. For her, avoiding the fight was worth more than the extra money would have been, and I respect the hell out of that. There was one more piece of the settlement that felt like a small bit of justice too. As part of the deal, the son had to cover our legal fees, so at least fighting him didn't come out of my pocket or hers. A small win, but I'll take it. And at the end of the day, I got to keep my 5%, my $40,000 and change. And I need you to understand what that amount of money means to a guy like me. That is roughly 9 months of my salary. 9 months. That is not a small thing. That is life-changing money for someone in my position. My friend, quietly, without ever saying a word to me about it, left me the equivalent of most of a year of my life as a gift, because we were friends. So did the greedy son win? In the money column, yeah, I suppose he did. He walked away with an extra $100,000 for behaving like the worst version of himself, and there's no getting around that. Justice, in the clean, satisfying way we all wanted, didn't really happen. He was rewarded for being awful, and that's just the truth of it. But it is what it is. I've made my peace with it, because when I really think about it, the money was never the part that mattered most to me anyway. What I keep coming back to isn't the $40,000. It's 5 years of Saturday mornings on the porch. It's a genuinely good man, 30 years older than me, who had no reason to take a younger neighbor under his wing and did it anyway. It's the fact that when he sat down to decide what to do with everything he'd quietly saved over a lifetime, he thought of me. Not because I manipulated him, because I was his friend and he was mine, and he wanted to leave me something to remember that by. Here's the thing I keep coming back to, and then I'll let it go. The son spent all that energy, made all that noise, called me all those things, and reached back into his own father's life to squeeze out an extra $100,000. And he got it. But he never once in any of it seemed to actually grieve his dad. Not that I saw. He treated his father's death like a business opportunity that opened up. And I look at that, and then I look at what I've got, which is 5 years of real memories of a man who genuinely loved his life and the people in it, and I would not trade places with that son for all $800,000 of it. Not for a second. He inherited the money. I got to actually know his father. I know which one of us came out ahead. His son can have his extra $100,000. I got the better end of the deal, and I knew that long before any money ever changed hands. I still think about my friend all the time. Football season starts and my chest gets a little tight because that was our thing and now it's just mine. I'll probably always keep 2 beers in habit in the back of my mind. But I'm grateful. Grateful I knew him, grateful for those 5 years, and grateful that when it counted, he thought of me. That's what I'm choosing to hold on to out of all of this. Not the lawsuit, not the son, just my friend and the fact that we were lucky enough to find each other over a fence. Thank you all for the advice. It helped more than you know at a time when I really needed it.